And then I will share my desktop. I think that should be everything I need to do. Okay. All right. So we for our code. Oh, so I gave you an assignment for like what was the top level? Human, person, what was it? Here, let's. I think I have it inside of. We have like magic users and stuff. Okay, yeah. So we have a top level class called person. So let's go ahead and let's build out this object-oriented schema, let's say. So we have a top level called person. That's going to be a name. Silent. Your speakers. There you go. All right. Not that I don't like hearing myself talk, but it's. All right, so we have a person, we have name, hit point, strength, agility, intelligence. All right, so we're gonna, what is it, def flat. There's something wrong with my L key. So class, person. And remember, there's something hidden in here. What's invisible right here? Object. Yep. So a top level class, if we don't specifically define who he inherits from, he inherits from the top level object class that makes him the bare minimum what an object is. That's where he gets his automatically gets his underscore str underscore functions and all those some other magical things. All right. So then we're going to define underscore init. Mute. All right. This guy will take in a self. It'll take in a name. It'll take in what I do: strength, agility, intelligence. Anything else? HP. Actually, we'll probably create our hit points. We actually probably can create all those things. If you took them in as parameters, that's fine, but we'll go ahead and create them. So I'm just going to take in the name for this guy. And we'll say self.name is equal to, you know what, actually, as of right now, we'll upgrade this to the other thing later. I'll go ahead and take in agility, strength, HP, and intelligence now. But we're going to probably end up doing that a little differently. So self.name, self.agility is equal to agility, self.strength is equal to strength, self.h. Yeah, see, there's something wrong with the L key. This was killing me last night, the L key. Like it seemed like I just wasn't pushing sometimes. Self dot strength HP is equal to HP. Self dot int is equal to int. Okay, so there's my, go ahead.
For mine, if you try to string, shows it as Google.
Shows it, you mean if I do this up here?
No, I'm talking about in something that shows it up as Google.
If you try to type in what in here?
Like when you get the string.
Well, did you do it like that or did you do it like that?
No, I actually put SDR.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it's just a color coding thing, it might not be any big deal. Is your file called something.py?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. If it runs fine, then I wouldn't worry about it. It's probably something with the editor just color coding things funky. Okay, so we'll leave that at person for now. Next, we have a magic user that is a person, right? And what differentiates a magic user from a person is a magic user gets mana. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to create a class. Oh my God. It is the L key, I'm telling you. Class magic user. And what was it? Did I call it person? I called it okay. So magic user, and this guy inherits from person. And we'll def init. This guy will take self in as a parameter. Now we know we're going to be taking in mana here. We'll actually, like I said before, we'll actually probably not take these in as parameters. We'll just generate them locally with like random, a random number generator. But for right now, we'll take them all. Now we are defining magic users in terms of persons. So that means in order to build a magic user, here, we're going to also need name, hit point, strength, agility, and intelligence. So right now, I'm going to take all those things in and pass them around, and then we'll see how we revamp this a little bit. All right, so I'm going to take in mana plus all those other things for that guy. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to initially call person dot underscore underscore init, passing this guy self and passing it all those other parameters that were passed in, letting them get set. Then we'll say self dot mana is equal to whatever the mana was passed in here. All right, so we took in all the parameters for a magic user. We used all but mana to go ahead and ask our person constructor to construct a baseline person for us using those things. Then we differentiated ourselves with mana. All right, so go ahead. You know what? I am not positive in Python, but in most languages it does matter. Most languages you have to have the, if you're going to make a call to your parent's constructor, it has to come first before you differentiate yourself. We can test it when we go to run this, but in fact, actually, let's test it right now. I really don't want to give it that many parameters. In fact, for right now, whatever. Oh, actually, I need to do it down here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a magic user, and I'll pass this guy. We'll give him 100 mana. His name will be Mike. Agility, we'll just do that on like a D20, let's say. So, you know, magic users aren't that nimble, so we'll say that's an 8. Strength, we'll say it's a 4. They're usually pretty weak. Hit points, we'll say is a 12, 13, whatever I clicked. And intelligent, they're usually pretty smart, so we'll do a 19. So magic users are all brains, no brawn. It's usually the idea. All right. So we're not going to get any output from this guy for right now, but we'll test your question. So I believe this should work fine. Okay, so that worked fine, but now I'm going to flip these two around. And most strongly typed languages would scream at us and say, if you intend to call your parent's constructor, it has to be first. Let's see if, seems to be okay with it like this. So, yeah, and I think that has more to do with loosely typed versus strongly typed. I would say it's probably good programming practice that if you are going to use your parent's constructor to partially build yourself, do that first and then differentiate yourself from it. Because think about it this way. What if I came in here and I said self.name is equal to Dave or something like that, thinking I just set my name to Dave. Well, then right afterwards, so I'll go ahead and print mu.name. So I'm passing in Mike as the name. Very first thing I'm doing is I'm setting the name to Dave. But then I'm calling my parent's constructor, which sets the name to whatever I passed in, which is Mike. So now Dave got flipped to Mike because the order in which I wrote it. Since I defined it as Dave first, then I called my parent's constructor, which redefined those things. Passing in, I passed in Mike here for my parameter for name. And that's what gets passed into the person constructor, which sets name equal to that. I basically undid what I wrote right here. Does that make sense? So order does make some sense from a logic perspective. So I would say good programming practice would be call your parent's constructor first, then differentiate yourself. Yeah.
For the init for magic user, do we have to include all the parameters of person? Or could we just do self mana for the init?
Well, when I go to write this, let's say when we upgrade this, I'm going to probably leave all those off and generate those. But for right now, let me answer your question in terms of what we have right now. You want to say this. You want to leave those off, but then still leave this line the way it is. I don't have these variables. So it's going to scream at me if I do this. You know, that I'm missing arguments. Does that make sense? Now, for this assignment, that's not that huge of a deal because I wanted you to kind of think about the inheritance model thing, and we're not doing things with this yet. But you know, if you're going to pass variables onto a parent's constructor, you have to have those variables accessible. That makes sense? What I'm going to do when we finish doing this is I'm going to randomly generate these values to give, like, you know, well, I will probably still take in the name here. That, you know, that makes sense. You know, I'm not going to randomly generate a name, although you could. That's what they do in those video games, and you're like, I'm never going to be able to spell that. You know, but agility, strength, hit points, intelligence, that might be something that for magic users, I might want to purposely hinder agility and strength and hit points and purposely boost intelligence, because magic users tend to be brains no bronze type thing. Brains no bronze, brains no brawn. Bronze is a metal, right? It's actually not. Isn't it an alloy? Ha! Ha! Didn't even learn that in college. I think that was like on How It's Made. At some point. I love those shows. All right, so does that make sense? Well, okay, so we'll just play it out here. If I don't pass those, and my person constructor is asking me to give him these 5 things, and I'm playing along and I'm saying, here, I'll give you those 5 things, but I'm giving them to him as variables. I don't have those variables to give. It's going to scream at me and say, you don't have a variable named name. You don't have a variable named agility. Now, I can do this. I can say that for magic users, I don't remember if I copied the comma or not, I did. I can do that. That's cool. It wants 5 values from me. I can pass those values in the form of a variable or in the form of a literal values like this, but this guy wants me to pass him 5 values, one way or another. So if I intend to call my parent's constructor, I got to give them self plus 5 things, however I get those. So you could say, I'm not going to take them in as a parameter here for magic user. That's okay. I would probably argue you probably want to take the name in as a parameter, but then you can numerically generate the other 4 values. That's probably the way we're going to ultimately do it. But for right now, I'm trying to exaggerate this idea. I'm building a magic user in terms of a person. And in order for that to work, a person requires 5 values. A magic user requires the same 5 values plus mana. So I'll take those 6 values in here as a magic user. I'll use 5 of them to create my baseline person, and then I'll use that extra one to differentiate myself from a person. Does that make sense? Okay, but like I said, for the homework assignment, I care more about your inheritance model of this, because until I actually give you something to do with these objects, you know, having them fight each other and stuff like that, we don't necessarily have we don't have anything to test against. We can't say, oh, well, it makes sense for me to take the mana or take the hit points or something like that. We're kind of just making an initial organizational stab at it. So I care more about that inheritance piece. Good.
So could you also kind of like define the variables, like, you know, like name equals like a string, like just define the variables for doing constructors?
Well, what do you mean? Like up top here?
Yeah, like before, yeah.
Yeah, you could, but then every single Magic user would have those same things.
Okay.
So if I came up here and I said that Magic users all have the name Mike, and every single one of them is going to be walking around with the name Mike, unless I change their name, I guess, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Okay.
You want your objects to kind of be this most generic version of that kind of object, so that you can then pass parameters to them to allow them to differentiate themselves from different Magic users. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. Ultimately, that's what I'm going to do. I'm drawing the line right now of let's focus on the inheritance side of it. But yeah, I'm not going to take all these parameters. I'm going to probably take just mana and name here. Okay. But the reason we wrote some code here is because he asked the question about, does the call to your parent's constructor have to happen first? In Python, it does not. But I'm telling you, good programming practice is you should. The only reason you're calling your parent's constructor is because your parent is doing some initial setup that is correct for you. And then you're going to further differentiate yourself here. Now, notice I can come in here and I can say self.name is equal to Dave. And now my name will be Dave, because I went ahead and I let my parent set my name to whatever was passed in. I passed in Mike. And then I said, you know what? I don't like Mike. Changed it to Dave. So now I have Dave as my name. Okay? Because I let my parent's constructor do everything it was going to do first. And sometimes you might have a situation where your parent's constructor does 90% of the things you want to do and then does an extra 10% of things you actually want to undo. But you might decide, instead of rewriting that 90% of the code, you'll just go ahead and let your parent's constructor do everything, and then you'll just undo that last little step, something like that. So I would say it's a good programming practice, and we'll throw this in the notes. Good programming practice is to have your call to your parent's constructor occur first inside of your constructor. So maybe we'll do something like this. When do I call the parent's constructor? So we're just going to give an overall thing that says good programming practice says call. It says that if you need to use the parent's constructor, call it first, then differentiate yourself. All right. Now, based on our running this little test, Python does not enforce this. I can tell you for certainty, Java and C# and Swift and Objective-C do enforce this. All of these are strongly typed languages. So my not necessarily fully tested conclusion would be that strongly, because it's good programming practice and strongly typed languages have the ability to enforce it, they are enforcing it, where a loosely typed language like Python doesn't have it. There's a programmatic weakness for why they can't enforce it because of how their object-orientedness is implemented. So my guess is that other loosely typed languages like Go, JavaScript, these guys would work similarly, where if you want to call the parent's constructor halfway down inside your constructor, you can get away with it. That's fine. And that does actually make a little some sense even with the syntax here, because the syntax we're calling the parents constructor here is saying person dot underscore underscore init, blah, blah, blah. It's treating it like I'm calling this specific function of the person class. Okay, where if I was writing this in Java, this would look like this. That's what the call to the parent thing looks like. I don't specify the name of the method or who owns it. It figured it out based on who I inherited from. In Java, instead of magic user person like this, we say magic user extends person. That's the Java lingo for saying the same thing. All right, so because we have these special keywords, this and super generated in Java, this is like self for Python, it's able to enforce this at the top level, where loosely typed languages, because of the way they're implemented, I have a feeling, I'm trying to think how I would implement like a language like Python. You could enforce it, but it might open up some other potholes or something like that I'm not thinking through. But official answer to your question is Python doesn't require it, but always put it first. I can't come up with a great example when you wouldn't want to have it first. Okay, so let's keep trucking here. All right, so now we also have, within magic user, we have necromancers that take in a pet name and a wizard that takes in an elemental type. So we'll have a, oh my gosh. The good news is I'm pretty sure didn't Apple have a problem with these keyboards? Because I think they're replacing them for free with their, whatever the Butterfly 2 keyboards are. So I never really had a problem with it, but yeah, it's like every third or fourth click it's missing. Must be sticking. All right, so we're going to say class necromancer, and this guy is a magic user. All right, and our constructor for this guy, I'm actually going to steal this constructor, is going to take in everything that a magic user took in, but it's also going to take in a pet name. Now, you didn't have to add these extra parameters at the beginning, but the order does mean something. If my necromancer, well, here, we already created a magic user. If my magic user was expecting me to pass it mana, then name, then agility, so on and so forth, that's the order in which I have to pass it things. This is the mana. This is the name. If I switched mana and name here, but left these guys alone, I'm going to be confusing the issue. It's a loosely typed language, so it would allow it, because we don't, we're not saying this is an integer and this is a string that it's expecting, but the order that we give it up here and the order we give it down here needs to match, because those variables get matched up to those parameters on a first come first serve basis, something like that. All right, so this is the constructor for necromancer. So the very first thing we'll do is we're going to call our parents constructor, which is magic user dot underscore underscore init underscore underscore, and then we'll pass it all of this crap. So we'll pass along self, and we'll pass it all those extra parameters for him to go ahead and build a baseline magic user. And then we'll differentiate ourselves by saying self.petName is equal to petName. So now a necromancer has differentiated themselves. Make sense? All right, similarly, we have a wizard, and a wizard takes an elemental type. So a wizard is going to be pretty similar to a necromancer. So it's a wizard, inherits from magic user. Instead of pet name, we're going to take a elemental type. We'll go ahead and call magic user with our base stuff. Then we'll set our elemental type there. So that's a wizard. Make sense? All right. Then we have a melee user, which is an energy-based guy. So a melee user is kind of like a magic user. So steal this guy. In fact, if I were writing this, it doesn't matter the order you put it in, but I might go ahead and kind of put those classes next to each other. You know, this is my top level. This is the next level in the hierarchy. This is the next level in the hierarchy, something like that. So this is melee user. So frustrating, where sometimes I don't get an L and sometimes I get 2. I guess at the end of the day, it's giving me the correct number of L's. I never realized how much you rely on the L key, though. So I taught a 4-hour grad class last night coding, and we were coding for most of the 4 hours, and I was getting pretty frustrated by the end. And I thought maybe it was Android Studio, but it was not. It's in here too, so it's the keyboard. I wonder if I could pry that thing off at lunch. Maybe it's something sticky in there. I do a lot of eating and stuff around my keyboard. I don't take care of my toys. All right, so melee user. This guy's not taking in mana, he's taking in energy, right? Okay, we'll still call our person constructor to do initial setup, and then we will differentiate ourselves here. By setting our energy. Cool? All right, and then we have our warrior and ninja. Warrior's defense. So our warrior is kind of like our necromancer. Necromancer. How come nobody corrected me on that? Terrible people. All right, so we're going to have a warrior. So here I'll steal this guy. How do you spell warrior? How do you spell warrior? More R's? All right, and a warrior is actually not a magic user. He is a melee user. So we're inheriting from him. All right, so for melee users, we're energy based. So we're not going to take in mana, we're taking in energy, right? So we're taking in energy there. And for a warrior, we take in defense. So instead of elemental type, we take in defense like that, right? So a warrior takes in defense, and then all the rest of the stuff are the parameters that a melee user requires. So I will steal these guys here, and we will pass them on to our parents constructor, which is actually a melee user. Like that. And then we will we'll differentiate ourselves by setting our local variable defense. Like that. So that's a warrior. A warrior is a melee user. His constructor takes in defense plus all the melee user stuff. Then he calls the melee user constructor, passing all the melee user stuff. Then he sets his specific defense. He differentiates himself after that. Make sense? All right. And then lastly, I'll steal warrior, so I have to change less stuff. Now for you, don't do too much copying and pasting. Type this stuff as much as you can. I'm just saving a little time here. I'm probably going to make an error. But it's the first time for me to introduce my first bug, I suppose. So we have ninjas, and they're speed-based. So this is going to be a ninja. He is a melee user. He's taking in speed plus all the melee crap. He'll call melee user, passing all the melee, and then we'll set his speed. Make sense? All right, so that should be our, inheritance model version 1 alpha or something like that. This isn't all that useful yet because a lot of those numbers are kind of, where are we going to get that from? If I create a ninja, I'm just pulling speed out of nowhere, right? I'm pulling energy out of nowhere. We're asking the user to make up that stuff, or it'd be a lot more useful if we had some logic inside of our constructors that did a lot of that magic for us, right? So we're going to go ahead and add that in. What I'll do is let me just give you this as a starting point. I'll throw it in Slack so you kind of have a baseline version of this code. I'm going to call this an acceptable solution for the homework. If you didn't take in all these parameters, that's okay as long as you have the right things inheriting from the right things. Sound good? All right, but we're going to make this a little bit better in a minute. So let me throw this into Slack. This is our channel, isn't it? 200. Code text snippet. We'll call this guy an initial death match, whatever. Object-oriented programming model. Like that. Oh, and by the way, for the couple of you that did ask the other day, this is the, that's my fracture right there. And then that's what my foot looks like. The break is here, that's the bone sticking up. But all the swelling is in other places. Yeah, that seems healthy. That's why I'm supposed to have 0 weight, be in a boot, and have my scooter. My wife already yelled at me this morning, it's fine. I didn't want to take the scooter out of the car. All right, so we got that. Let's upgrade this dude a little bit. So we're going to go back and we're going to use our random number generator dealy flippy thingy here, okay? So now a person does have agility, strength, hit points, and intelligence, okay? We're going to have those things, but we're going to go ahead and randomly generate those. Now, we probably want to be able to roll some dice, like D20s. Just keep it simple with these guys here right now. All right, so what is it? Random dot next int, get int. What's my generator for integers? Randint, just randint. Okay. All right, so we're going to have our person not take in all these things. He's just going to take in a name. And we'll go ahead and set the name to whatever was passed in. But now for agility, now what we're doing here is we're designing this for a random normal person. All right, so we're going to say these guys are all going to be a D20 for their normal stats. So this is going to be randint 1 to 20. So there's some random integer between 1 and 20. Some random integer between 1 and 20. Some random integer between 1 and 20. Maybe we say hit points is a random integer between 10 and 30, something like that for a normal person. Pulling stuff out of the air here. All right, so now what we've done is we've said a person's much easier to create. You give me a name and I will build what I call the average normal person who has stats that are some value between 1 and 20 and has hit points between 10 and 30. Now we can differentiate ourselves later on, but that's what a person now takes to get them created. So now when we get down to magic user, I don't have to pass all these values here to the person constructor. I just give him the name because that's all he wants. He only wants me to give him a name, one parameter. I have to give him as many parameters as he's expecting. Okay, so I'm going to give him the name. I took in the name here. Okay, and I also took in the mana. But what we're going to say is, you know what? A magic user knows he's going to need some mana. So I'm not going to take in mana here either. I'm still going to just take in the name. And a person is going to set all of this stuff up. And then I'm going to set my mana equal to maybe a random int between 50 and 100. Kind of your mana pool, how many fireballs you can shoot type thing. All right. Now we're going to say, you know what, as a magic user, though, keep in mind, we are calling our person constructor first. We're giving ourselves an initial starting point. But as a magic user, you might say, you know what? A magic user is going to have less agility, less strength. We actually maybe could leave agility alone. Maybe we say they're not as strong, but they are smarter. Something like that. So what we'll go ahead and do is we're also going to have less hit points. So I'll take these three. They're already set. They have some value associated with them. Now what I could do is I can go ahead and subtract from that value as long as it doesn't make it go to 0 or something. In fact, maybe we even do that rather than generate a new random number. Go ahead.
All you could do is, I know it sounds kind of random, but if the intelligence is at a certain
Well, yeah, we're dealing with. I get what you're saying, where they roll their stats, and if they're, that would be the kind of the way that you might do in Dungeons and Dragons. You generate your characters, and you don't necessarily have to establish a class before you roll your stats. So you roll your stats, you see that you have high intelligence and crappy strength. Maybe you don't want to be a fighter. I would always pick a fighter. Because I always go crazy in D&D. I once did a wizard that refused to use magic. Yeah, so he only used he picked up sticks, and we actually pulled we switched universes. I pulled out some books from this tabletop game called Rollmaster, which is a lot older than D&D. And I was rolling on the Horn Tusk crit table for him poking people with sticks. It's pretty good. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going to do with some if statements here. So I can re-roll random numbers if I want, just say here's a new value. But now what I'm going to say is in Magic User, after I've established the person, I can now go in here and I can say, okay, well, if, let's just start with strength. So what do you think that the highest strength the Magic user should have is? Maybe 10, something like that. So if self.strength. Now, this guy does already have a variable called strength because it was set up here inside the constructor. Okay, so if self.strength is greater than 10, I'm going to nerf it. All right. So if it's greater than 10, what I can do is I can subtract we just have to come up with some modifier for it. Why don't we do this? We'll say self.strength is equal to 10 minus rand int 1 to 3. Oh, thanks. So if his strength is greater than 10, if he's too strong to begin with, we'll nerf him by setting it to 10 minus some random number between 1 and 3. So 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, 7, 8, 9. Maybe he gets lucky and he rolls a 10. That would be the strongest we'll allow a magic user to be in our world here. All right, that's only if the strength is greater than 10. Now we'll say hit points if self.hp is greater than, we don't want them to be too beefy. So let's say if they have more than 20 hit points, we'll go ahead and say self.hp is equal to 20 minus randint 3 to 7, something like that. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air at this point. Just we nerf him a little bit. Again, Moon's gonna align, and he can end up with 20 hit points. That's gonna be our strongest magic user, because then this if statement would not happen. If he had 20 hit points, this will not fire because he doesn't have more than 20. So it is possible for a magic user to have 20 hit points. After that, the most he can have is 17. All right, so that's for our hit points. Then for our intelligence, we're going the other direction with intelligence. If self.int is less than 10, we'll say self.int is equal to 10 plus randint. I think we want to boost it a little bit more. I'm going to say 3 to 6. Because usually magic users are disproportionately smart. And if they have a strength of 1, that is typically unimportant. Unless they're trying to do some sort of like jumping feat or something like that, where, you know, these guys are they're really frail. But, you know, whatever. Just think about Gandalf guy from Lord of the Rings, right? Yeah, you wouldn't want to, I mean, you wouldn't want to get in a, you pick yourself in a boxing match against him, unless he gets to use magic. All right, so that's kind of what a magic user looks like. Kind of make some sense? All right, so for your homework, take this one step further, and you finish, and you can use your own imagination for this, you finish expanding on melee user, necromancer, wizard, blah, 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 in a similar way to what we've done for these other ones. Okay? And remember, we do have, there's a hackathon tomorrow from 3 to 6 p.m. It's here on campus. If you're going to it and you have not actually hit the link to go sign up with the Commons, do that as soon as possible, because they're going to bring enough food and enough prizes and crap and stuff like that. Don't just reply to my thing. And then take a picture of yourself at the thing or something like that, because what I'll do is I'm going to give a homework assignment over the weekend. And there's going to be a feature of that homework assignment. Or possibly, I don't know what the assignment's going to be yet, but either a feature of the homework assignment or possibly the whole assignment, depending on what it is that you'll be able to get out of if you attended the hackathon. Okay, so have a picture of yourself. So what you'll turn in for that homework assignment, assuming it's a feature, is everything but that feature plus the picture to get your full credit. But for our assignment due on Friday, this isn't a whole lot of work stuff here to do. Go ahead. Yeah, take what I've done here between person, magic, and magic user, and let it spill through to the rest using your own imagination. You know, pick how you want people to be more powerful, how you want them to be weaker, whatever it is. All right, sound good? I'll go ahead and I'll throw this code up as a starting point. Again, I really want to emphasize, if you are going to the hackathon tomorrow, which I would encourage all of you to do, especially from a networking perspective. The Commons runs a lot of startup companies downtown, and there might be a lot of internship opportunities. Whether they're presented at the hackathon tomorrow or not, you'll get to meet people who you can then follow up with and look for some of those opportunities. It's 3 hours. It's going to be minimal coding, so it's a lot more brainstorming and stuff like that. It's 3 hours worth your time. All right? I'll see everybody on Friday. One second.